Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schlexer, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another Lazy CEO podcast. My name is Jim Schlexer. I am the host today, and I am the founder of the CEO Project. So, hey, you get another one with me. Lucky you. So, today we're going to talk about kind of a slightly complicated topic, and one that maybe not a lot of people have been through, and that is, turbulent times. If you go back into history, and we've been talking about this for a little while, these high inflationary, complicated environments are a bit unprecedented. There are many people that in their entire working career have never seen interest rates over, low single digits and never seen inflation, typically seeing, a couple of points of inflation. And so 3% raises look pretty good. And, that's all changed, right? It's not uncommon for the people that we work with to see, 5-7% average raises. Some are even a little bit higher because they're behind the market, because we've got a few people pressing the point in a constrained labor environment to try to bring people on board. I would say, to the extent people have been talking about minimum wage, the new $7.75 an hour is $15 or $17 an hour. So, and it is very hard to get anybody to do a manual labor and entry level job for less than $15. I mean, and to be frank, look, $15 an hour is 30 grand a year. That is a tough number to live on. So there's a lot of upward pressure on a lot of costs, and that makes it difficult for us to deliver our business results as we go forward. So I'm going to kind of start with, as we go through turbulent times, an emotional element, which is organizational resilience. And many organizations are what I would call fragile. In other words, when subjected to change, stress levels increase immediately. Not to get too material science geeky, but they have a relatively high modulus, meaning it's stiff. Like we press on it and it creates stress immediately. A low modulus would be something that, we press on it and it's got a little squishiness in it, right? It's got some give in it, basically. And those are kind of the elements of organizational resilience. The definition, if you will, is they can easily adapt to changing circumstances without stress. Easily adapt to changing circumstances. And look, we've had and will have even more, changing circumstances. And, you may want to look at your organization as to whether that induces stress into your people and into your structure, into your organization. There are a couple of things to look for in terms of trying to enhance, and this is going to tie to some of my recommendations. So I'm kind of laying a little groundwork here. The organizations that are resilient have sort of there are a variety of papers on this, but one of them really talks about 4 key characteristics. One is they are robust, meaning, I would say in the case of robust, it means they're not absolutely maxed out all the time. They've got buffers built into the organization, both economic buffers as well as people buffers, so that, when there's a problem, instead of like, oh my gosh, everybody is working as hard as they possibly can, we cannot handle a perturbation to the system. They go, okay, we've got some ability to absorb that change with money, people, whatever, as we try to do it. Now, as we try to deliver results, we're always trying to optimize, but I'm actually advocating in this environment that you want to back off of that just a bit to create buffer, which is to create robustness in your organization, which is an ability to handle change that you may not have anticipated. So that's sort of one element of it, and sort of how we think about it. I'll get into that in more detail in a minute, but think about your organization. Are we maxed out, running on fumes, pounding it out every day, getting every ounce of everything we can get out of every process and every person and every dollar? then you are highly vulnerable to changes. If you say, look, we're not there, we're working hard, but we got some buffer built in the organization to deal with stuff, that's probably where you want to be. We don't want to go all the way to country club, right? Where, kind of chill, hanging out, having a good day, something happens, we deal with it. Super robust. You probably get fired as a CEO while you're at it, unfortunately. So you can't be there either. Redundancy is interesting, another one. So in critical, and we talk about single points of failure, and this is really the opposite of that, which is have some redundancy built into your systems. I'm going to say, it is too expensive to have a completely parallel organization, like redundant up and down the organization. And so you may want to think about where are the really, really critical points of failure. Like if I got a phone call that this isn't working anymore for whatever reason, I would not sleep that night, like a giant problem, a singular supplier, for example, or it would be a single point of contact. And there you might want to build some redundancy in case of a problem. Or, so that's risk is one way to think about it. The other is, meaning risk to you. The other is just stability of that process or thing. Like if you go, that one's a little wonky, it's a little marginal, that supplier's under financial stress, I hope they make it. Well, that might be time to be thinking about building redundancy into that particular area to improve the resilience of your organization to a change like, hey, we're going chapter and we can't ship you any more product anymore. Resourcefulness is the nature of the people, sort of the creativity, the MacGyver ability, if you will, their ability to find answers that don't currently exist, or maybe piece together what you do happen to have to come up with an answer. And then the last one is what they call rapidity. They went for all R words in this particular paper, but I would call that agility, bias for action. So I had an organization that went through some very hard times that I was involved in. And they talked about looking at their people, and they go, do they run to the fire or do they run away from the fire? So house is on fire. Do you grab a hose and run in? Those are the people we want in a difficult situation. Or do they either step back or do they run away? And so that willingness to take action in the face of, complication and difficulty and so forth is a very key factor. And that, I think it's to some extent a hireable feature. I used to ask it as an interview question. I'd say, all right, so give me, like a horrible situation you were involved in. Oh, okay, horrible. We're going bankrupt, whatever. We're bank covenant. Okay. Well, what'd you do about it? Well, we got together a committee and we had a number of meetings and we developed consensus over a number of months. I'm like, oh my God, kill me now, right? I mean, he says, unluckily, company went out of business. Go figure, right? And as opposed to, I immediately went to the bank and renegotiated the line. I went to my suppliers, I negotiated different terms. I did all these things, action that caused me and allowed me to survive. So you can see that both would argue, well, I did something about it. Yeah, but the one you want is the second one, not the first one. I always asked, it's a bit of the war analogy, but like if we had to get in a foxhole, who do I want in the foxhole with me and you can tell some people can handle that and some people can't. So that's really the other question. So let's get into some more. So just think about your organization in terms of resiliency, right? Robustness are there buffers? Redundancy, have you built in critical failure points some ability to handle, oh no's that might happen as you run the business? Resourcefulness of your people, their creativity, their willingness to step outside the box, come up with solutions. And then the bias for action, they call it rapidity, but bias for action. Do they go do or they think? Generally, as companies get larger, they generally lose a little bit of that bias for action. So, large companies, hear me now. Smaller companies generally have a little higher bias for action most of the time. So let's get into some things you can do specifically. The first one, given that the environment is uncertain, I'm going to say actually, and I'll get to it in a little bit, I'm going to say we may be done with the Fed raising the interest rate. They just did another quarter point. That may be it, or it's close to it. So I'm going to say the argument I saw was, they'll stop when either they declared victory over inflation or they've destroyed the economy, one of the two. So, I don't know which. I hope they get to inflation before they destroy the economy. But um, we're getting close to the end when those kind of things are coming out of like, gee, we're getting into danger zone. So that'll tie to some of my comments on financing in a minute. But so the first one is don't overcommit. And hopefully we were talking maybe almost 18 months ago about if you had debt of any flavor, lock it in low, long term. It ain't going to get better for a long time. Well, here we are, with a Fed fund rate of 5%. And so the inverse advice is now coming forward, which is short-term debt is better than long-term debt. You want to readjust as soon as you can. So to the extent you can unwind your debt to an adjustable debt, you may suffer in the short term. I'll tell you that right now because, interest rates are high, but you're going to ride the curve down as opposed to people that lock in long right now. They're gonna say, oh my gosh, I gotta refi myself out of this. I'll have to pay, early termination fees. I'll have to. So, if you can go to more variable debt as we go down, which over the next year or two, we're going down almost certainly. They're not going to hold at this level. They may go a little bit higher. Odds are they're going down. And this is the inverse of what happened to Silicon Valley Bank. They went long on very low interest rate bonds, and then the prevailing interest rate went up. And so instead of having this lovely, we borrow money from you at 0.1% and we loan it out at 4%, and we sit back and make money, it inverted, and that's what put them in trouble. One of the things put them in trouble. So short-term debt, don't overcommit. I'd be super conservative in any forecast I was given to a third party. I'd be very, very conservative because you don't know. You don't know. It's turbulent. It's changing. What's the election going to do? What are interest rates going to do? It is a difficult environment to forecast. So I would be conservative, particularly conservative on my costs. So many times we build forecasts that kind of grow ourselves out of our situation. We go, right, I'm making 5% and I'm going to grow 25% and then I'll make 15%. So everything will be cool. But if you don't grow, you end up going from 5 to -5. And so be very conservative on your cost forecasting. Let the growth come and drive the costs versus push the costs and hoping to get growth. So it's a little inverted what we've been in an expansive economy where you could push money at it, get the growth, and it would pay off. It may not pay off in this environment. And so therefore, let the growth drive the cost, not the cost drive the growth. It's a little inverted where we've been over the last couple of years. The other one is in this environment is for the golfers out there, they talk about drive-ins for show and puttings for dough. Well, in business, revenues for show and profits for go. So kind of frankly, forget the revenue a little bit and focus on profitability. Make sure you're making money. So I was involved in one financial digital banking kind of company. They were not they were focused exclusively on growth through this crazy time we were in. Well, the party ended. They had no pathway to profitability because they weren't even thinking about profitability. And they've got, let me just say, a hairball full of problems on their hands as a result of it. I think they'll make it through. But, that was really caused by no focus on profit, only focused on, if you're focused on profit, focused on positive cash flow, at least neutral, if you're in a high growth environment, you can last forever. Neutral cash flow equals you can last forever. The minute you're negative cash flow, you're beholden to third parties. And in this environment, that's not where you want to be. So focus on profit, and specifically cash profit, not just EBITDA profit. I'll give you an example. I was working with a firm, and the CEO would constantly talk about EBITDA profit. And yet they had massive below the EBITDA expenses, capital, interest, so forth. So he was cash negative every single month, constantly raising money. And I'm like, what is wrong with this picture? The guy keeps telling us how profitable we are, and yet he's raising money like crazy because he's always out of cash. Answer: EBITDA look great, so don't get fooled by EBITDA. Cash flow is the one that matters. In fact, Warren Buffett has some talk. If you ever want to hear somebody really get negative on EBITDA, listen to Warren Buffett talk about it. He says, I can't pay any salaries, I can't pay any dividends, I can't buy any buildings, I can't buy any equipment with EBITDA. I can only do it with cash. So his view is that this was a metric that the investment bankers convinced us was important, but it's an absolutely baloney metric in his estimation. And frankly, in the survival, ensuring your survival, you should ignore EBITDA and only focus on cash profit. So, okay, so let's go over to pricing. And I've talked about pricing before. It's the magic, right? In an inflationary environment, so let's just do the math. If anybody in the audience hasn't raised their prices at least 20% in the last 2 years, you're behind the curve. Costs have gone up 7.5+% for the last 2 years. I think there's a 7 and an 8 overall. And you could argue, well, Jim, that was this sector that I'm not exposed to. And yeah, but you know what? Your employees are, which is why they need why I've been looking for significant raises, right? And so if you are not keeping up with the cost of the universe, you are doing a negative arbitrage, right? You're buying it for 3 and selling it for 2. And so you should, in fact, I'll give you an example of that. Is I was just talking to, I own a CrossFit gym, and I was talking to the woman who runs it for me. I was like, when was the last time you took a price increase? She goes, oh my gosh, it's been years. I'm going to tell you what, we're going up 25% on our CrossFit gym membership price, like in the next month, because we've been struggling to make money. And I'm like, there you go. That's the reason. We're paying more to coaches, paying more to rent, paying more to utilities, paying more to insurance, paying more. And we haven't done anything about it to sort of create an umbrella under which all that operates. And so if you haven't taken those kind of price increases, you need to do it now. And the reason why I say now, well, ideally you did it a year ago, but if you haven't done it a year ago, now. The reason why I say now is, remember, I'm telling you, in the next year or two, we're going to start coming off of inflation. Interest rates are going to come down. You're going to lose the opportunity to do it in the next 6 to 12 months, let's say, because they'll watch Fed will start dropping the fund rates. Inflation comes down. You come in and go, hey, we've been doing some math and we got to jack up our rates 20%. And people will go, what are you talking about? Inflation is 4.5%. Fed fund rates 3.2. Why are you banging me right now? So it's a difficult conversation. In this environment, you can still get away with it. So you need to do it soon before the window closes on this one. The other side is cost control. And some people are better than this than others. But I can tell you, when we've had an expansive economy for a while, there is a cycle of getting kind of flabby and fat and not paying attention to things because we're worried about revenue more than we are about profit. And you're letting diamonds drop on the floor. And so going to cost control, particularly on supply chain, is a very, very good place to be, because I guarantee you have not looked at those costs the way you could have or should have in the last couple of years. You didn't have to. Well, now you should. So I'd get hard on costs. Now, for a while there, you didn't have a choice. Like, there were some highly constrained materials that people just had to pay: steel, aluminum, microchips, so forth. They had to pay. They had no choice. But that's begun to soften. And so this sort of high demand, low supply market that existed in many items is changing. And that's an opportunity to make sure that you've got the right price in front of you going forward. And labor is another one. We'll get to that one in a minute. And I don't think you have an option about that except this, which is you should be at one area you should be investing in is automation. Because there's a formula that talks about interest rate versus cost of labor. And that formula tells you, should I have more capital, because interest rates are relatively lower, doing the work, or should I have more labor doing the work, depending on the hourly rate? And so the hourly rate is going up and will continue to go up, because if you look at the demographics, there are just less people to do the work. The boomers are all retiring, and we were a big honking generation. There isn't another big bubble like this coming. And so there will be more people leaving the workforce than coming in. Therefore, supply will be constrained, and it's going to make the more recent labor rate increases look silly compared to what's coming. So labor is going to get more expensive, and that will drive you towards spending capital, software, equipment, other ways of automating processes that allow you to use less humans in your process. And one way of kind of looking at that is you go, well, gee, Jim, kind of like employing people. I think that's a good purpose for my business. And, we give them a good wage and they can buy a house and a truck and send their kids to school and all that good stuff. And I go, yeah, awesome. Except we are going to come to a position, this one isn't so close, that you can't even get the people. Not available, any price, or a price that's so stupid you couldn't possibly pay it. And so this is, yes, it's about improving profitability. I'm all over that. But it's also about literally survival of your business, because I think you're going to have a very, very difficult time finding people, particularly in some unique skill categories, just not available. We don't have enough. We're not making enough, and you won't be able to find them. And then what do? Unless you've automated those processes, you're going to be bamboozled. So automation is a good place to spend money, whether that's, and so we've got one member in the CEO project. He's a manufacturer. He is spending tens of millions of dollars automating his manufacturing processes because he can't find people. And he thinks it's only going to get worse. And he's right. And so he'll be able to, it's not quite lights out, but elements of his business, you load up material. So you need a human to load up the material at the moment. Load up the material, let it run for 24 hours, pull the finished goods off the other end, turn out the lights except for the machine running. That's it. So that's kind of crazy high level of automation, but he is protecting himself from a labor availability problem. And even now, I mean, I know in recent history, we would say interest rates are kind of high, but in history, they aren't. 7, 8, 9% is actually not a stupid interest rate. And I know there's people whose heads are exploding when I say this, but they didn't live through the 80s where, if it didn't start with a 1, it wasn't an interest rate or an inflation rate. So, you can survive at these numbers just fine, but it does skew you a bit towards more because labor costs are going up faster than capital costs. It pushes you towards capital. I talked about the fast city side. The other one is cash. So I talked about run the business for cash. Super important. Profitability, specifically cash profitability, but also you should hoard cash. And this goes into the area of having buffers. So, in a normal business, we go, all right, we're gonna we make $1 million. We're gonna distribute all of that, most of that, all of that minus a little bit. And I'm going to say this might be a year or two where you say, you know what, we're going to keep the distributions in the business for a while. And we're just going to see how it goes. They're still yours. They're not going anywhere, hopefully. And if they do, they'll go to something that'll earn you even more money. So that's not so bad. But it's about having a buffer for that oh damn moment that you might have. If you don't have cash on your balance sheet, if anybody's had the experience of going to the bank when you really need money, that is an extremely unpleasant experience because they got you. They know you need it. Frankly, if you need it, they don't really want to give it to you. It's when you don't need it that they want to give it to you. And so don't put yourself in that position. Ideally, you have some capital to weather some variability in what's going to happen because this turbulence is real. And a cash buffer is going to let you sleep well. I've got one CEO that I work with that talks about having as much cash as he does debt. So at any given moment, he could pay off all his debt. And that way, if the bank gets persnickety with him, he goes, you really want to play this game? Because tomorrow I don't owe you anything. And that lets him sleep at night. And given that that's probably not going to happen, he has some cash available for things, whatever that might be. The other element on hoarding cash is to reduce your dependence on debt. So to the extent you shrink your debt position, that's a winner. So I would almost equate holding cash and dropping debt. They're kind of the same-ish for me. I still like to have cash on my balance sheet, but dropping particularly your more onerous debt, right? So for example, a line of credit may not have covenants on it. So I would not so much look at the interest rate, although I would a bit. I'd look more at the covenants on the debt. So if you have high covenant debt, which is when I don't perform quite as I thought I was going to, all of a sudden I trigger these rights that the bank has with me to either increase interest rates or get more money from me or terminate the loan or whatever. Shrink those to the maximum possible. And your low covenant debt, the stuff is like, we just measure how much inventory you have and we take 80% of that number, or we measure how much your accounts payable are and we take 65% of that number. Done. Asset-based line effectively. Those are very covenant light, very relatively friendly debt. Keep those, get rid of the structural debt to the extent possible, or shrink it on the covenant side, because that's what's so I've been through covenant violation more than once, unfortunately. And it is a super duper unpleasant place to be. Quick story. So for those of you that read Thomas Wolfe's book, A Man in Full, it talks about a real estate developer in Atlanta. And when he's up and flying, he's meeting on the 37th floor and it's mahogany and he's drinking coffee out of bone china cups. And there's, well-educated, lovely guys and gals in suits around him, to every whim. They take him to games. Then he gets in trouble. And the next meeting is in the basement on a linoleum floor with a chair that has like one leg that's a little wonky, a giant do not smoke sign on the wall, and a guy with a rumpled shirt and, coffee stains on his tie who has no sense of humor. And he, in the story, he goes, "Hey, what happened to my relationship banker?" And they go, "He's gone." And so you don't want to have that experience of meeting the guy in the basement with the coffee stains. So get rid of your high covenant debt to do that. All right. The other thing that maybe, and this goes back to the fat, skinny cycle thing. This is a great time to do a little deeper analytics on your lines of business, your customers, and your products. So what do I mean by that? I want to actually understand by product, by customer, what's the profitability? Because I guarantee you that in your mix, you got some stuff you do that doesn't make you money. Doesn't make you money. I just worked with a logistics company recently, and they kept talking about how they were quoting things at 30% margin. Turns out this was 30% what we call dynamic margin, meaning they didn't cover any overhead in this 30%. Well, it turns out they had 20% manufacturing overhead and 15% general overhead, corporate overhead. So let's see, 30 minus 20 minus 15. Oh boy, we're losing 5% on every deal we quote. And now there were some they made money on, but some were below 30. I mean, they were losing 10, 15% margin on every single piece of business they wrote. So we're in the process of correcting that. But I guarantee you have some customers that lose you money, products that lose you money, services that lose you money. And you somehow justified that to yourself in the day. It's all revenue. Revenue's good, or it's all part of the relationship, or bup, bup, bup. And I'm going to tell you, now's the time to A, figure that out, and B, change it. I did this at one company I worked at, and our whole, I can't remember overhead, but basically I needed 30% gross margin, including manufacturing overhead, for me to make like 10%, not a stupid amount of profit. So I actually ran a program called Nuts, nothing under 30. So we looked at every single product. If it didn't have 30% gross margin, we either price it up or price it out. And you should have heard the screams from my marketing and sales people. It was like I was poking them with a knife. They're like, you can't do this. It's a relationship thing. Like, look, if it's that damn important, they'll pay $50 more for the item. And if they won't, that's okay. I won't make it for them anymore. And eventually we were able to move essentially everything. There were one or two things that they convinced me we had to keep doing, and there was no way to make money on it. But by the time I was done, we didn't have except a couple. Nothing in that business was under 30% gross margin, which means everything contributed to profitability. So time for that analysis and a reprice if it's underwater. And I guarantee you there's some gems on this that you have not really looked at going forward. So this is an addition by subtraction strategy. So back to my point, your revenue say you price up some things and some people pass on them, your revenue may shrink, but your profit should grow. Now, the argument that people make is about overhead coverage, and I won't get into that one. That's a little bit of phony baloney math, but think about fully loaded cost when you're talking about this. And then maybe just the last thing to talk about in a difficult environment is customer loyalty. And so this is a time to double down on loyalty, because I can tell you it gets harder to acquire quality clients in this environment. You can acquire cost-driven clients all day long, but that's a kind of a losing strategy unless you truly are the low-cost provider, and not many of us are. So you want to keep the ones you got, because getting new ones is going to be hard for a little while. And people have seen this. I got a lot of clients who are saying, hey, marketing's getting harder. I'm spending more and I'm not getting the result I used to get. My rate of customer close is not what it used to be. Yep, got it. They're all hunkered. They've picked their partners and they're hunkered down for right now. And they don't want to take the risk of changing to another provider. The low cost guys will, but then you get what you pay for, right? You're going to get a really cheapy rate. They'll switch if somebody else is 5 cents cheaper. This is Ian and I talked about this in the last podcast. So you got to be careful about that. So double down on what's the customer experience? Are we easy to do business with? Are they in love with us? Would they recommend us? Can we get more business from those clients? Because adding new clients is not going to go as well as it used to go. I can tell you just one story through the last, this is a little dated, but a few years back, there was a bit of a recession, and CEO Project, we really struggled to add clients, really hard. And I'll tell you why. I mean, joining a CEO advisory group looks like extra, right? And so when I'm laying people off in my business, which many of the people we talked to were reducing staff, and they said, look, the optics of me laying people off and then me meeting with a bunch of CEOs to talk about the business doesn't go together. I can't join. I understood it. I didn't like it, but I understood it. So acquisition got really constipated. But on the other side, we focused very, very hard at delivering value. And we didn't lose a single client through that period, even though some of them were under some financial distress. So and that was the secret to making it. Basically, not that we were in jeopardy, but that was a big part of, we came out of it fairly strong because we didn't lose anybody. So focus on customer loyalty, love bomb the ones you've got, make sure you don't lose them, really think through the process, go spend time with them. You're going to focus more on a more limited set than you used to, because we're not quite as expansive as we were. We're a little more defensive in this period to make sure we make it through. So that's how to deal with turbulent times: inflation, turbulence, uncertainty, which you're certainly to face in the next couple of months here and years. And it's all about resilience and getting ready for it. So there are things you should be doing right now to improve the resilience of your organization to make sure that you make it to the other side. So on that note, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time on the Lazy CEO podcast. Thank you, everybody. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.